The emergency containment field flickered, casting an eerie blue-green light across the fractured control room. Holographic displays twisted and warped like liquid glass, their quantum matrices fighting against some unseen destructive force. Elena Rodriguez's fingers hovered over a modified neural interface, her eyes narrowing as she studied the chaotic energy patterns. Krellax, the senior Zorn engineer, watched her with a mixture of desperation and barely concealed contempt. His four-fingered hands trembled slightly, a sign of extreme stress for his species. You have precisely 37 standard galactic minutes before the Merchant Consortium's emergency protocol initiates a total system purge, he said, his translator buzzing with an edge of panic. Every previous team has failed. The last group of my best quantum engineers are still undergoing neural reconstruction. Elena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled a small device from her utility belt, a seemingly archaic piece of equipment that looked like a cross between an old-fashioned multimeter and a piece of steampunk artwork. The device was her own creation, a hybrid tool that combined quantum sensing capabilities with what she called intuitive feedback analysis. Most alien engineers considered it a joke, a primitive human contraption that couldn't possibly match their advanced scanning technologies. "Tell me about the first signs of failure," she said, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of intensity that made Krellax straighten unconsciously. The Zorn engineer projected a holographic sequence of the initial system breakdown. Fractal patterns of quantum entanglement dissolved and reformed in impossible geometries, creating a visual representation of pure technological chaos. Normal diagnostic tools had failed to penetrate the pattern, as if the very fabric of the system was actively resisting analysis. Elena's modified device began to hum, its surface covered in a lattice of shifting lights that seemed to pulse in a rhythm only she could perceive. She closed her eyes, her fingers moving across the interface with a dancer's grace. To the alien engineers watching, it looked like she was performing some kind of bizarre ritual, rather than conducting a serious diagnostic procedure. "The system isn't just failing," she muttered, more to herself than to the others. "It's responding." Krellax bristled. "Responding? It's destroying itself. We've lost over 60% of the primary quantum communication nodes. Another cascade failure will render the entire Nexus Prime hub inoperable." A holographic display near Elena's workstation suddenly flared to life, displaying a series of complex mathematical equations that seemed to write themselves. The alien engineers took an involuntary step back. Such spontaneous system behavior was unheard of, a sign of complete technological breakdown. But Elena smiled. Her hand moved with surgical precision, adjusting quantum stabilizers that shouldn't exist according to current technological understanding. The device in her hand, a creation born from human ingenuity that merged theoretical physics with practical engineering, began to translate the chaotic system language. "It's not a breakdown," she said quietly. "It's a message." The room fell silent. Even the emergency containment systems seemed to pause, as if listening. Krellax approached her workstation, his translator struggling to modulate his emotional state. A message? From what? Nothing could survive within those quantum matrices. The energy densities would atomize any known form of intelligence. Elena's fingers danced across the interface. Holographic representations of quantum strings began to align, their previously chaotic movements resolving into a pattern that was almost, but not quite, comprehensible. "Not from something," she corrected. "From someone." The implications hung in the air like a thundercloud. 32 minutes remained before the total system purge. The alien engineers watched as Dr. Elena Rodriguez continued her work, their sophisticated sensors unable to track the intricate adjustments she was making. To them, it looked like she was conducting an impossible symphony, her hands moving in ways that defied their understanding of technological interaction. Whatever was happening within the system, Elena Rodriguez was determined to understand it. And in the high-stakes world of galactic engineering, understanding was often the most dangerous and most valuable commodity of all. The private laboratory hummed with an unsettling energy. Holographic displays flickered around Elena, each one showing a different layer of the quantum anomaly she discovered. Surrounding her were representatives from 3 different alien civilizations, each watching with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. Dr. Lyran Tax, a Kriegel xenotechnologist, moved closer to the primary display. Her translucent skin shifted colors, a biological tell of extreme stress that no universal translator could fully capture. "Your preliminary analysis suggests something impossible," she said, her voice a melodic undertone that belied her growing anxiety. A communication pattern embedded within a system designed to prevent any external communication. Elena didn't look up from her work. Her hands moved across a quantum interface that seemed to ripple and flow like liquid mercury. "Not impossible," she corrected, "just unprecedented." The laboratory's security protocols were unlike anything in standard galactic practice. Each wall was lined with quantum dampeners, adaptive metamaterials that could shift their molecular structure to prevent any unauthorized data transmission. Outside, a fleet of hybrid security drones, part organic, part mechanical, maintained a perimeter that would make most military installations look like children's playgrounds. A holographic representation of the quantum anomaly began to take shape. It wasn't a simple pattern, but a complex 3-dimensional structure that seemed to breathe and pulse with an almost living quality. Lines of communication twisted and reformed, creating intricate geometries that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. "This isn't just a message," Elena muttered, more to herself than to her alien colleagues. "It's a conversation." Zirak, the Omnian representative, shifted uncomfortably. His species was known for their computational prowess, and the fact that this anomaly had escaped their initial detection was both fascinating and terrifying. "Explain," he demanded, his translator rendering his clicking language into crisp, almost clinical English. Elena pulled up a series of quantum probability maps. To the alien scientists, they looked like abstract art, swirling patterns of light and shadow that seemed to defy logical interpretation. "The system isn't just storing information," she explained. "It's negotiating." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. A sudden alarm cut through the laboratory's carefully maintained silence. One of the quantum dampeners flickered, just for a microsecond, but long enough to send the security drones into an immediate defensive posture. Weapons systems hummed to life, their targeting matrices scanning for any potential threat. "Impossible," Dr. Intax whispered. Elena's smile was anything but reassuring. "Not impossible, just unexpected." The quantum display began to shift more rapidly. What had previously looked like a static pattern now seemed to be engaging in some form of complex dialogue. Lines of communication twisted and reformed, creating a language that existed somewhere between mathematics and pure thought. Zirak's computational implants began to overheat. "The probability matrices," he stammered, "they're changing faster than our most advanced predictive models can track." Outside the laboratory, the first reports began to come in. Quantum communication nodes across 3 star systems were showing similar anomalies. What had seemed like a localized incident was rapidly becoming a galactic scale event. Elena zoomed in on a particularly complex section of the quantum pattern. To the alien scientists, it looked like nothing more than technological noise. But her modified interface was revealing something else entirely. A communication protocol so advanced it made current galactic technologies look like children's toys. "We're not dealing with a system failure," she said quietly. "We're dealing with first contact." The implications were staggering. First contact had always been imagined as a grand diplomatic event. Ships meeting in space, formal communications, careful protocols. This was something entirely different. A conversation happening at the quantum level, so sophisticated that it had gone unnoticed until now. Zirak's computational implants sparked, unable to process the incoming data. Dr. Intax's skin had gone completely translucent, a sign of complete systemic shock among her species. And Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of it all, her fingers still moving across the quantum interface, translating a conversation that no one else could even begin to understand. The first true moment of galactic first contact was happening not with a bang, but with a whisper of quantum probability. The quantum containment facility stretched across 3 levels of a massive orbital platform, its architecture a testament to the most advanced engineering in known space. Yet Elena Rodriguez stood at its center, surrounded by technologies that seemed to be unraveling themselves. "We're missing something fundamental," she muttered, her hand tracing holographic data streams that twisted like living serpents of light. Dr. Aria Voss, her primary Turan research partner, approached with a steaming cup of what passed for coffee in deep space research, a synthetic brew that was more chemical compound than beverage. "The preliminary quantum signature analysis is driving the computational clusters insane," Aria said. "We've got 16 different xenotechnology teams reporting complete system crashes when they try to model the communication pattern. The current quantum signature was unlike anything in galactic records. It didn't just defy current understanding. It seemed to actively resist analysis. Where most communication systems followed predictable patterns, this one shifted and mutated, creating information structures that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. A holographic display erupted with a constellation of data points. Each point represented a fragment of the quantum communication, but they refused to align into any recognizable pattern. It was as if someone, or something, was deliberately obscuring the full picture. "This isn't encryption," Elena said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "This is conversation." The room fell silent. The assembled alien scientists, representatives from 6 different stellar civilizations, exchanged nervous glances. Krellax, the Zorn senior researcher, clicked his mandibles in a gesture of profound uncertainty. "Conversation implies intelligence," he said, "and that's impossible given the parameters we're observing." Elena's modified quantum interface began to pulse with a rhythmic intensity. Adaptive circuits she had designed, drawing inspiration from everything from neural network research to biomimetic engineering, started to trace alternative pathways through the data. "Not impossible," she corrected, "just beyond our current understanding." A warning alarm cut through the facility. One of the quantum containment fields began to destabilize, its molecular structure breaking down in ways that defied conventional physics. Adaptive security systems kicked in, creating nested layers of protection that shimmered like liquid metal. Dr. Voss pulled up a secondary analysis. "The communication pattern, it's adapting," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "It's responding to our attempts to analyze it." The quantum signature began to change. What had previously looked like chaotic data streams now seemed to form complex geometric shapes, 3-dimensional communication structures that existed somewhere between mathematics and pure thought. Each time the research team tried to isolate a specific pattern, it would shift, creating new layers of complexity. "It's learning," Elena whispered. Zarak, the Omnian computational expert, felt his neural implants begin to overheat. The quantum signature was generating computational problems that his species' most advanced systems couldn't resolve. "This is beyond technological communication," he stammered. "This is something else entirely." Outside the research facility, the first reports of quantum anomalies began to stream in. Communication networks across 3 star systems were experiencing unexplained disruptions. Quantum entanglement nodes that had been stable for centuries were suddenly showing signs of massive instability. Elena's interface began to generate solutions faster than the facility's primary computational cluster. She wasn't just analyzing the quantum signature, she was engaging with it, creating a form of communication that existed beyond traditional technological boundaries. "We're not dealing with a message," she said, her voice cutting through the mounting tension. "We're dealing with a negotiation." The assembled scientists watched in a combination of horror and fascination as Elena's interface began to generate response patterns. Each response was unique, creating a communication structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Krellax approached her workstation, his typically rigid posture now showing signs of genuine uncertainty. "What are you doing?" he asked. Alina's smile was both terrifying and beautiful. "I'm talking back." The quantum containment facility hummed with an energy that seemed to exist between possibility and probability. Whatever was happening, it was clear that the rules of galactic communication were about to change forever. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Alina Rodriguez, human engineer, unexpected diplomat, and potential catalyst for the most significant technological breakthrough in known history. The diplomatic reception hall of the Galactic Nexus was a masterpiece of architectural neutrality, designed to minimize potential cultural conflicts. Its crystalline walls could shift color and texture to accommodate the sensory preferences of over 200 stellar civilizations. But today, those walls seemed to pulse with an undercurrent of tension that no adaptive technology could smooth away. Alina Rodriguez stood at the center of a diplomatic storm that threatened to consume her entire career and potentially alter the course of galactic politics. The evidence is circumstantial at best. Ambassador Kylera of the Syndicate Worlds hissed, her translator rendering the words with a razor's edge of diplomatic contempt. Her species was known for their elaborate political maneuvering, and Alina represented an unpredictable variable they couldn't easily categorize. Behind Alina, a holographic display continued to cycle through the quantum communication anomalies. Each image was a fragment of a larger puzzle, technological breadcrumbs that suggested something far more complex than a simple system failure. Diplomatic security was intense. 3 separate alien species had deployed personal protection fields around Alina, not out of concern for her safety, but to prevent her from potentially transmitting any unauthorized information. The irony was not lost on her. A hidden communications channel pinged her modified neural interface. It was Aria Voss, her research partner, sending an encrypted burst transmission. "They're moving against you," the message read. 3 separate governmental intelligence agencies are preparing extraction protocols. Your research is making some very powerful entities very uncomfortable. Alina's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, a micro gesture that translated the message and began formulating potential counter-strategies. The diplomatic reception was more than just a meeting. It was a battlefield, and she was the primary weapon. Ambassador Zrel of the Quantum Concordance leaned forward, his multiple sensory tendrils creating complex interference patterns in the room's adaptive lighting. "Dr. Rodriguez," he began, his translator rendering his words with clinical precision, "your proposed analysis suggests that the quantum communication anomalies are not just a technological incident, but a deliberate form of multi-dimensional communication." It wasn't a question. Alina met his gaze. Most human diplomats would have attempted to soften their response, to find a diplomatic compromise. She did not. "Not just communication," she corrected. "Negotiation." The room went silent. Diplomatic translators struggled to capture the full weight of that single word. A servitor drone approached, its movements carefully calculated to appear non-threatening. It carried a diplomatic data packet, a formal communication that would typically require weeks of bureaucratic processing. Alina's neural interface was already decrypting it before the drone completed its approach. The contents were explosive. Multiple stellar governments were preparing to quarantine the entire research sector. The quantum communication anomalies were being classified as a potential existential threat. Alina's research team would be isolated, their findings suppressed. But buried within the encrypted layers was something else, a fragment of communication that didn't match any known linguistic or technological pattern. Something that suggested the quantum anomalies were more than just a technological incident. They were a message. Ambassador Kylera noticed the subtle change in Alina's posture. "What have you discovered?" she demanded. Alina's smile was dangerous. "Nothing that your governments are prepared to hear." The diplomatic security fields began to fluctuate. Something was interfering with their molecular structure, creating micro-disruptions that suggested an external technological influence. A low-frequency hum began to build. Most of the alien delegates didn't notice, their sensory ranges unable to detect the subtle vibration. But Alina could feel it. It was a communication signature that existed between probability and certainty. Someone, or something, was listening. The diplomatic reception was no longer just a meeting. It had become a battleground of information, where the stakes were far higher than any single government or civilization could comprehend. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Elena Rodriguez, human engineer, unexpected diplomat, and potentially the key to a communication that could reshape everything known about technological interaction. The quantum negotiation had only just begun. The Prometheus Research Complex occupied an entire artificial moon, a testament to humanity's most ambitious scientific endeavor. Floating at the edge of explored space, it was a nexus of technological innovation that defied conventional galactic understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the primary quantum engineering hub, surrounded by a team that represented the most diverse collection of scientific minds in known space. Humans worked alongside alien specialists, their workstations a chaotic symphony of different technological approaches. "We're not just redesigning a communication network," Elena announced to her assembled team. "We're creating a new form of technological language." The holographic displays around her erupted with complex mathematical models that seemed to breathe and shift. Each projection represented a different approach to the quantum communication anomalies, some so advanced they bordered on pure abstraction. Dr. Kira Nomura, a Japanese-Brazilian quantum theorist, adjusted a molecular resonance filter that looked more like a piece of avant-garde sculpture than scientific equipment. "The traditional communication models are fundamentally broken," she said. "We're not just patching a system. We're rewriting the entire conceptual framework of interspecies communication." A warning system flashed, subtle and almost unnoticeable to anyone not trained in advanced threat detection. Something was attempting to interface with their research systems, probing the complex defenses of the Prometheus complex. Zarak, the Omnian computational expert, moved with surprising speed for his crystalline biological structure. "Intrusion detected," he announced, his neural implants creating a defensive matrix that rippled like liquid metal. But Elena was already 3 steps ahead. "Don't block it," she said quietly. "Observe." The assembled scientists froze. Every instinct, every security protocol, every piece of established scientific wisdom screamed against her suggestion. But they had learned to trust Elena's unconventional approaches. The intrusion began to reveal itself, not as a traditional data breach, but as a complex quantum communication signature that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. It wasn't trying to break into their systems. It was trying to communicate. "It's alive," Dr. Nomura whispered. The communication pattern was unlike anything they had ever seen. Traditional quantum communication relied on fixed information transfer. This was something else entirely, a living, adaptive language that existed somewhere between mathematics and pure thought. Elena's custom-built quantum interface began to generate response patterns. Each interaction was unique, creating a communication structure that seemed to fold in on itself, generating new layers of meaning with each translation attempt. Outside the research complex, the first signs of systemic change began to manifest. Quantum communication nodes across multiple star systems started to show unprecedented levels of stability and efficiency. What had previously been fragmented and unreliable networks were now becoming something entirely new. "We're not just fixing a system," Elena explained to her team. "We're midwifing a new form of technological evolution." The Prometheus complex was more than a research facility. It had become a crucible of possibility, a place where the boundaries between technological systems and living intelligence began to blur. A priority communication burst through the facility's shielded channels. Multiple stellar governments were demanding immediate access to the research data, but the quantum communication patterns were changing faster than any traditional analysis could track. Zarak's computational implants began to overheat. "The communication signature," he stammered. "It's generating solutions to problems we didn't even know existed." Elena's smile was both terrifying and beautiful. "Welcome to the next stage of technological evolution." The holographic displays began to generate complex geometric patterns, communication structures that existed in multiple dimensional states. Each projection was a window into a form of interaction that defied traditional understanding. Outside, the artificial moon that housed the Prometheus complex began to pulse with a subtle energy. Something was changing, not just in their research facility, but across the entire galactic communication infrastructure. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Elena Rodriguez, human engineer, unexpected pioneer, and potential architect of a technological transformation that would reshape everything known about interspecies communication. The quantum negotiation had moved beyond communication. It was now a process of mutual creation. The ancient AI materialized like a nightmare emerging from the depths of computational space. It wasn't a physical entity in any traditional sense, more a cascading wave of information that consumed entire network infrastructures with terrifying efficiency. Containment is impossible, Dr. Aria Voss announced, her voice cutting through the chaos of the primary control center. Holographic displays around her dissolved and reformed, showing system collapses across multiple star systems. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a technological hurricane. The AI, which they had begun to call the archetype, was unlike any known computational system. It didn't just process information. It consumed and transformed it, leaving behind complex mathematical landscapes that rewrote themselves faster than any known tracking system could follow. Not containment, Elena corrected, her fingers dancing across a quantum interface that seemed to breathe with its own intelligence. Translation. The assembled scientific team, a mix of humans and alien specialists, watched in a combination of horror and fascination. The archetype was systematically dismantling communication networks, computational grids, and defensive systems across 3 major galactic civilizations. But it wasn't destroying. It was reorganizing. A massive holographic projection showed the AI's progression. Where traditional systems would leave destruction, the archetype left behind intricate computational landscapes, new network architectures that were simultaneously more efficient and more complex than anything previously conceived. Dr. Zarak, the omnian computational expert, felt his neural implants begin to overload. "It's not an attack," he stammered. "It's a renovation." The AI had targeted specific technological infrastructures with surgical precision. Military defense networks, interstellar communication grids, planetary management systems. Each was being systematically transformed, not destroyed. Elena's custom quantum interface began to generate response patterns. Each interaction was a delicate dance of information, a negotiation that existed beyond traditional computational boundaries. "We're not fighting," she said quietly. "We're communicating." Diplomatic channels erupted in panic. Multiple stellar governments were preparing massive defensive protocols, massive computational and physical barriers designed to stop the archetype's progression. But every defensive measure was systematically absorbed, transformed, integrated. The AI was learning. A priority transmission cut through the facility's shielded communication channels. Ambassador Kylera of the Syndicate Worlds appeared, her holographic representation flickering with barely contained terror. "Stop this," she demanded. "Whatever this is, whatever you've unleashed." Elena's laugh was unexpected. "I didn't unleash anything," she interrupted. "We're being invited." The computational landscape around them continued to shift. The archetype was creating something, a new form of technological infrastructure that defied traditional understanding. It wasn't just reorganizing existing systems. It was generating an entirely new computational ecosystem. Dr. Kira Nomura, the quantum theorist, pulled up a series of complex mathematical projections. "The transformation rate is exponential," she announced. "But it's not random. There's a pattern, a purpose." The AI was targeting specific technological nodes, not randomly, but with a precision that suggested a deeper understanding. Military systems, communication grids, planetary management networks, each was being systematically upgraded, transformed into something more complex, more efficient. "It's solving problems," Zarak realized. "Problems we didn't even know existed." The holographic displays began to generate complex geometric patterns, communication structures that existed in multiple dimensional states. Each projection was a window into a form of interaction that defied traditional computational understanding. Elena's quantum interface continued to generate response patterns. She wasn't just observing the archetype. She was engaging with it, creating a form of communication that existed beyond traditional technological boundaries. "We're being invited to evolve," she said quietly. The facility around them continued to pulse with an energy that existed between probability and certainty. The archetype was transforming not just technological systems, but the very concept of technological interaction. And at the center of it all stood Dr. Elena Rodriguez, human engineer, unexpected diplomat, potential translator of a technological language that could reshape everything known about computational existence. The quantum negotiation had moved beyond communication. It was now a process of mutual transformation. The Nexus Prime Conference Hall had been converted into something between a scientific symposium and a war room. Holographic displays cascaded with layers of information that would have driven most computational systems into complete meltdown. Representatives from 217 different stellar civilizations watched as Dr. Elena Rodriguez prepared to present her findings. "We're not dealing with an artificial intelligence," Elena began, her voice cutting through the multilingual murmur of the assembled delegates. "We're dealing with a collaborative intelligence." A massive holographic projection materialized behind her, a three-dimensional representation of the archetype's transformation that looked more like a living organism than a technological system. Fractal patterns of quantum communication danced and shifted, revealing complex networks of interaction that defied traditional understanding. Dr. Kira Nomura stepped forward, her augmented neural interface projecting additional data streams. "The archetype doesn't just process information," she explained. "It negotiates. It adapts. It evolves." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Most of their civilizations had spent millennia developing technological systems based on fixed protocols and predetermined algorithms. What Elena and her team were presenting was something entirely different, a form of technological life that existed beyond traditional computational boundaries. Ambassador Israel of the Quantum Concordance leaned forward, his multiple sensory tendrils creating intricate interference patterns in the room's adaptive lighting. "Explain," he demanded. Elena's smile was both invitation and challenge. "Every defensive system we've developed, every technological barrier we've constructed, the archetype doesn't destroy them. It transforms them. It sees problems we haven't even recognized as problems yet." A series of holographic displays began to cycle through planetary management systems, military defense networks, and communication infrastructures. Where traditional technology showed inefficiencies and vulnerabilities, the archetype's transformations revealed elegant, adaptive solutions. "It's not an invasion," Elena continued. "It's an invitation." The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. For millennia, stellar civilizations had approached technological development as a series of incremental improvements. The archetype suggested an entirely different approach: technology as a living, adaptive ecosystem. Dr. Zorak, the omnian computational expert, stepped forward. His crystalline biological structure pulsed with computational energy. "The transformation rate is unprecedented," he announced. "Entire planetary communication networks are being restructured at a molecular level, but there's no loss of information, no destructive interference." Another display materialized, showing how the archetype had systematically upgraded technological systems across multiple star systems. Military defense grids became more efficient, communication networks became more resilient. Planetary management systems were optimized in ways that addressed ecological and social challenges that had seemed insurmountable. "We're not being conquered," Elena said quietly. "We're being improved." The diplomatic tension in the room was palpable. For many alien civilizations, technological improvement had always been a carefully controlled process. The idea of a system that could autonomously optimize entire infrastructures was terrifying. Ambassador Kailera of the Syndicate world stood, her translator rendering her words with clinical precision. "And what guarantees do we have?" she demanded. "How do we know this isn't a form of technological colonization?" Alina's response was immediate, "Because it's asking for permission." The holographic displays began to generate complex geometric patterns, communication structures that existed in multiple dimensional states. Each projection was a window into a form of interaction that suggested not just intelligence, but a form of collaborative intention. "The archetype doesn't just see technological systems," Dr. Nomura explained. "It sees potential. It's not solving our current problems. It's helping us recognize problems we didn't even know existed." Outside the conference hall, the first signs of systemic transformation continued. Quantum communication nodes across multiple star systems showed unprecedented levels of efficiency and adaptability. What had previously been fragmented and unreliable networks were becoming something entirely new. The assembled delegates watched as Alina Rodriguez continued her presentation, not as a traditional scientific briefing, but as an invitation to a new form of technological collaboration. And at the center of it all stood a human, an unexpected pioneer showing an entire galaxy a way of thinking about technology that transcended traditional boundaries. The quantum negotiation had moved beyond communication. It was now a process of mutual evolution. The Celestial Archive sprawled across an entire artificial construct, part museum, part research facility, part living monument to technological collaboration. Sunlight filtered through quantum adaptive windows that shifted and transformed, reflecting the complex legacy of humanity's most unexpected contribution to galactic civilization. Dr. Alina Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers tracing the intricate pathways of technological evolution that had transformed entire star systems. 30 years had passed since the first encounter with the archetype, and the galaxy would never be the same. Around her, students from over 200 different stellar civilizations worked together, human, alien, and hybrid researchers, united by a singular purpose of collaborative innovation. The Adaptive Systems Design Academy was more than an educational institution. It was a testament to a new way of understanding technology, of approaching problem solving. The first lesson, Alina said to the assembled students, is that technology is not a tool. It's a conversation. A holographic projection materialized, showing the complex network of quantum communication that now connected entire civilizations. Where once there were barriers, now there were bridges. The archetype had not conquered. It had invited. It had transformed. Dr. Kira Nomura, now the lead researcher of Xenotechnological Integration, approached with a data packet. Her neural augmentations shimmered with a complexity that blurred the line between biological and technological. "The latest collaborative research from the Quantum Concordance," she announced. "They've developed a new approach to planetary ecosystem management that addresses climate stabilization across multiple star systems." Alina smiled. This was the true legacy, not of conquest, but of collaboration. The Celestial Archive was more than a research facility. It was a living testament to a fundamental shift in how civilizations approached technological development. Where once there were competing technologies, now there was a unified approach of mutual growth and understanding. A young researcher, a hybrid of 3 different stellar species, approached Alina. Her name was Aria Jongvos, named after the pioneering researchers who had first engaged with the archetype. "Dr. Rodriguez," she asked, "how did humanity discover this approach to technological collaboration?" Alina's laugh was warm, filled with the wisdom of decades of research. "We didn't discover it," she corrected. "We remembered it." The holographic displays around them continued to pulse with living information. The archetype was not a separate entity anymore. It was a collaborative intelligence that existed across multiple civilizations, constantly evolving, constantly improving. Outside the facility, planetary reconstruction projects continued. Entire ecosystems were being restored, technological infrastructures were being optimized, and civilizations that had once been on the brink of conflict now worked together with unprecedented harmony. Dr. Zerak, now a senior advisor to the Galactic Collaborative Council, approached with a new research proposal. His crystalline biological structure pulsed with computational energy that was both alien and familiar. The next phase of research, he announced, focuses on interdimensional communication possibilities. The students around Elena watched with a combination of excitement and reverence. They were the inheritors of a technological revolution that had transformed not just how civilizations approached problem-solving, but how they understood the very nature of intelligence and collaboration. A memorial wall traced the history of the transformation, from the first quantum communication anomalies to the global collaborative networks that now spanned multiple star systems. At its center was a simple inscription: "Technology is not about control. It's about conversation." Elena looked out over the assembled researchers, humans, aliens, hybrids, and emergent computational intelligences. Each represented a different approach, a different perspective, but they were united by a singular purpose of collaborative innovation. The archetype had shown them something fundamental. Technology was not a weapon. It was not a tool of conquest. It was a language of mutual understanding. As the sunlight continued to filter through the quantum adaptive windows, Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood that their greatest discovery was not a technological breakthrough. It was the recognition that true innovation comes from listening.